The store was dimly lit now, most of the day's customers long gone, leaving only the hum of the fluorescent lights above. The young cashier, barely out of high school, moved methodically down the aisles, putting the last few cans and packets into place. His uniform was slightly wrinkled from a long shift, and a sheen of sweat clung to his forehead, a leftover from the rush-hour chaos earlier. Outside, the city streets were almost deserted, shadows stretching across the pavement under the weak glow of street lamps. A distant roar reached his ears, the unmistakable sound of motorcycles approaching. At first, he thought it might be harmless bikers passing by, but as the engines grew louder, a gnawing sense of unease crept over him. He instinctively glanced toward the glass doors at the entrance, the reflection of the empty street flickering in the polished floor. His hands tightened around the edge of the counter, knuckles whitening. The night had always felt lonely after closing, but tonight carried a different weight, a prickling tension he couldn't shake. The rumble of the bikes grew into a roar, and soon headlights cut through the store's front windows, scattering patterns across the shelves. The young cashier felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had heard stories from other workers about troublemakers lurking after dark, but he had never expected to face them himself. Every instinct told him to retreat toward the small back office, but the door was too far away, and the thugs would reach him before he could get there. The group arrived outside the doors, revving engines one last time before shutting them off with a metallic click. Laughter spilled out into the night, low and menacing, carrying an air of overconfidence. The cashier swallowed hard and tried to steady his breathing. He had to stay calm. Every muscle in his body tensed, ready to respond, but mostly hoping that, somehow, they would pass him by. The night seemed to stretch and stretch, each second heavy with anticipation, the fluorescent lights flickering above like a warning. The street outside was quiet again for a heartbeat, but the silence was deceptive. He could feel that something was about to erupt. The door burst open with a harsh clang, the bell above ringing wildly, cutting through the uneasy quiet. The young cashier jumped, his heart hammering in his chest, as three figures swaggered inside. Their shadows stretched across the linoleum floor, distorted by the flickering fluorescent lights. The tallest one leaned casually against the counter, a cruel smirk playing on his lips, while another jabbed a finger toward the young cashier, the motion sharp and aggressive. The third circled behind the aisles, kicking over a small display and laughing, the sound echoing unnaturally in the empty store. "Hey kid, where's the cash?" the tallest one demanded, voice rough and impatient, like gravel sliding over glass. The cashier froze, his hands gripping the edge of the counter so tightly his knuckles were white. He tried to speak, but no words came out. Fear had tightened around his throat like a vice. The thugs' eyes glinted with a dangerous amusement, sensing his hesitation and mistaking it for weakness. One of them leaned closer, invading the small space behind the counter, and jabbed a finger against the young man's chest. "Don't play dumb with me," he hissed. "I said, where's the money?" The cashier's pulse raced, every instinct screaming for him to run, but he knew the front door was blocked, and the thugs' bulk made escape impossible. His mind scrambled for options, for some way to defuse the situation without getting hurt. They taunted him relentlessly, pacing back and forth like predators circling prey. Every step they took made the floorboards groan under their weight, echoing through the near-empty store. The youngest of the group shoved a bag off a nearby shelf, sending a cascade of snack packets skittering across the floor. "Look at him, shaking like a leaf," he sneered, leaning over the counter with a menacing grin. The cashier could feel sweat running down his temples, and his breathing became shallow. Each laugh, each jibe, hammered at his nerves, leaving him trapped in a haze of fear. Unseen by the thugs, the group of bikers had stayed behind after buying their snacks, lingering near the back of the store. Their motorcycles were parked just outside the windows, engines still warm, the chrome glinting faintly in the dim light. The leader, a tall man with a weathered leather jacket and a presence that seemed to command the air around him, leaned against a shelf, watching silently. His eyes, sharp and calculating, followed every move of the intruders. He could feel the young cashier's fear radiating across the room, a tension that made the hairs on the back of his neck rise. The thugs continued their mockery, oblivious to the silent observers. They jeered, shoved, and tossed packets around, their arrogance growing with each passing second. But inside, the bikers' patience was deliberate, measured. They didn't need to rush. the element of surprise was already on their side. One of them, sitting near the snack aisle, casually moved a bottle to the floor, letting it roll toward the entrance. The thugs didn't notice, their attention completely consumed by the young cashier, whose hands trembled over the edge of the counter. A faint rumble from the bikers, engines vibrated through the floor, almost imperceptible, yet enough to catch the leader's attention. He stepped forward, boots silent on the linoleum, and surveyed the scene with quiet intensity. His presence alone was intimidating, his stance relaxed but unyielding, like a storm holding back its first strike. The young cashier's eyes flicked toward him, a glimmer of hope sparking in the midst of panic. For the first time, he realized he was not completely alone. The thugs, still laughing and sneering, remained unaware of the looming danger. Their overconfidence, fueled by ignorance, blinded them to the fact that the balance of power was shifting. The leader exchanged a subtle nod with his friends, a silent signal that they were ready to act. The air seemed to thicken, the tension in the store coiling tighter with every passing heartbeat. Outside, the motorcycles waited like silent sentinels, engines idling, ready to roar if needed. The store seemed to hold its breath. The thugs, still laughing nervously, hadn't yet realized the shift in the room. Then, from the back, the leader of the bikers stepped fully into view, his tall frame cutting a striking silhouette under the harsh fluorescent lights. His eyes, calm but piercing, locked onto the tallest thug, and the air around him seemed to thrum with quiet authority. "I think you boys should leave," he said, his voice low, deliberate, and carrying a weight that made even the bravest of men pause. For a moment, the thugs froze, uncertainty flashing across their faces. The smirk of arrogance faltered, replaced by a flicker of fear. They glanced at one another, suddenly aware that the balance of power had shifted dramatically. One of them took a tentative step back, his bravado melting under the sheer presence of the bikers. The cashier, still gripping the counter, felt his own tension ease slightly, hope threading through the lingering fear. The leader didn't move further. He didn't need to. The others stepped forward behind him, forming an almost imperceptible wall of silent strength. Their posture, relaxed but unyielding, made it clear they were ready to act if necessary. The thugs' laughter died away, replaced by muttered curses and the shuffling of feet across the floor. "Maybe we should go," one stammered, voice barely more than a whisper. Realizing they were outnumbered and entirely exposed, the thugs' aggression evaporated. They muttered threats, half-hearted and meaningless, before stumbling toward the door, their confidence shattered. The young cashier exhaled, a shudder running through his body as he finally allowed himself to relax. The hum of the fluorescent lights returned to normal in his perception, and the scattered items on the floor seemed less threatening now. Once the door closed behind the fleeing thugs, the store fell silent again, save for the soft creak of the ceiling fan and the faint rumble of motorcycles outside. The leader turned to the cashier, offering a small, reassuring nod. "You're safe now," he said simply, the calm in his voice almost grounding. The other bikers gave brief nods, their presence enough to reassure without needing words. The cashier's hands, still trembling slightly, sank to his sides, and a nervous laugh escaped him, half from relief and half from disbelief. As the bikers returned to gather their purchases and head out into the night, the young cashier watched them go. The night outside seemed a little less dark, the streets a little less threatening. In a moment that would linger with him for years, he realized that courage sometimes came in unexpected forms, and that help often arrived just when you needed it most.